Welcome to Vault Studio.
This is Story Vault Studio. Claire Bennett died on her own front porch, locked outside in the open air, while her uncle's family stayed warm behind a door she'd paid for herself. Then she opened her eyes again, 5 days before the freeze that killed her. 5 days to save her parents. 5 days to make sure the people who left them to die in the cold never saw what was coming. This time, Claire wasn't going to kneel in the snow and beg. She was going to build a fortress, stockpile everything her family would ever need, and let her uncle's own cruelty become the thing that destroyed him. If you enjoy immersive stories like this, consider subscribing. Now, let's begin.
Claire knelt in the snow beside her parents, pounding her fist against the steel door she'd paid for with her own money, the door to the house her mother and father had spent a lifetime earning. Inside, she could hear the television. She could hear Uncle Ray's laugh. Her father's hands had gone the colour of wax. Her mother had stopped shivering, which was worse than shivering, folding down against the frozen porch like something deflating. Somewhere behind that door, Ray's family lay wrapped in the comforters Claire had bought, breathing air cooled by the unit she'd installed, eating through food stores she'd spent a fortune building. Nobody inside so much as glanced out the window. Claire pressed her forehead to the door and stopped feeling her own hands. The last thing she was aware of was the shape of her mother's fingers, gone still around hers.
Her eyes opened on warmth. The freeze that had locked her jaw and stiffened every joint was simply gone, replaced by the weight of a down blanket and a pink nightdress she hadn't worn in years. Claire sat up too fast, heart slamming, and grabbed for her phone off the nightstand. The date on the screen stopped her cold in a different way. December 8th, 2026. The catastrophe wasn't supposed to hit until the 13th. 5 days. 5 days before the temperature fell off a cliff, from 14 degrees down to 94 below zero. Before half the country either froze solid inside their own homes or starved with nothing stocked beyond a week's groceries. 5 days, and she was going to use every hour of them.
Mum, Dad, I've got an errand. Claire was already pulling a duffel bag out of the closet, moving with a purpose that had nothing to do with errands. Diane hurried out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, calling that dinner was almost ready, asking where on earth she thought she was running off to. Claire didn't answer. She shut the bedroom door behind her a little too hard. Only once the latch clicked did she let the tears come. Last time, she and her parents had taken Ray's family in out of nothing but decency, and Ray's family had repaid it by deciding they ate too much, putting all 3 of them out in the snow without a second thought. She remembered her father wrapping her frozen legs inside his own coat, over and over, trying to breathe warmth back into her skin. She remembered her mother curling around her, rubbing her palms raw, trying to keep her hands alive. If she'd been given this life back, she was not going to waste it.
The first stop was the old homestead, 2 hours out past the highway exit, a house nobody in the family had bothered with in years. The smell of mildew hit her the moment she stepped through the door. The place was bigger than she remembered. 2 long stone sleeping benches built into the walls, easily enough room for 3 people to live comfortably through anything. Claire knocked her knuckles against the wall and found it solid, despite a decade of neglect. She had a contractor on the phone within the hour, ready to talk about a full renovation and insulation job. City apartments ran on centralised heating, and plenty of families had space heaters besides. But once the disaster hit, the grid would drain fast. Power would ration down to a few hours a day, then nothing at all. Only solar panels and underfloor radiant heat would keep a house warm once the lines went dark. She photographed every corner of the old house before driving to meet the renovation crew.
Standing across the desk from the site manager, Claire laid out exactly what she wanted. The outer wall reinforced and raised to 7 feet, the gate swapped for a coded aluminum alloy model, motion sensors wired along the perimeter. Every room's masonry stove torn out and rebuilt so a single load of firewood could turn the whole house into a sauna. 4 solar panels on the roof, enough that the indoor temperature would never drop below 77 degrees. The site manager rubbed his forehead and said the timeline was brutal for the money involved. 3 days wasn't enough for work like this. Claire slid her card across the desk and offered 30% over the going rate. That was enough to get him promising the job would be done, no excuses, inside 3 days. She checked her balance, still comfortable, and moved to the next phase of the plan. A fuel yard sold her 5 truckloads of the best coal they had. Watching the crew stack the old house's storage room floor to ceiling eased something tight in her chest. She had kindling and starter logs piled in the backyard besides, more than enough to see the winter through twice over. With the fuel handled, Claire hit the shopping centres in a single frantic sweep. Cold weather clothing came first. The house would stay warm, but the drive there and back wouldn't, and there was no such thing as over-prepared. After that came toiletries and paper goods in bulk. Last came the calorie-dense staples: meat, eggs, milk, produce. She bought in volume but split her purchases across several stores so nobody would notice the size of the haul, and rented a private storage unit to hold everything until the house was ready to receive it. 3 days blurred past in a rush. Claire drove back out to check on the finished work. She shoveled a scoop of coal into the new masonry stove, added a handful of kindling, and inside 20 minutes, the firebox glowed like a coal seam. Inside, the thermometer read 88 degrees, and the sleeping bench itself was hot enough to bake bread on, close to 140. The solar battery bank held steady on its own, keeping the house above 77 degrees with no fire at all, hot water running around the clock. Satisfied, Claire paid the balance in full and changed the gate code herself before she left. Once everything was locked down, she spent the next stretch hauling supplies out to the homestead in 3 separate truckloads until the place was packed to the rafters. She stacked more than a dozen 100-pound sacks of flour, cases of bottled water stretching along one wall, and enough instant noodles, dried rations, chocolate and pressed energy bars to see 3 people through a siege. That evening, she drove home to find Ray already at the kitchen table, deep in easy conversation with her parents, like he owned the place. "Oh, look who's back. Where have you been running off to these past few days?" Claire gave him a thin smile back. "Work stuff. Meetings." Ray let it drop and turned to Diane instead, complaining that the cold this year was something else, that his boy had already caught a chill from it, that the forecast said it was only getting worse. He rubbed his hands together, put on his best pitiful face, and asked, almost bashfully, whether the family could come stay a few days if things kept dropping. Their building's heating just wasn't up to it. Every alarm in Claire went off at once. This was the moment. Last time, Ray had come to Diane with this exact request, and Diane, soft-hearted about her own brother, had let them all move in, a decision the whole family had paid for, frozen out on their own doorstep. Robert hesitated, glancing sideways at Claire, saying it might be a little inconvenient timing-wise. Claire crossed the room and put an arm around her father's shoulders, giving him the warmest, most sincere smile she could manage. There was plenty of room, she told him. Ray's family could move into their apartment the day after tomorrow, since she was about to take her parents travelling somewhere warmer anyway. Tomorrow wouldn't work, though. Tomorrow she needed the whole apartment cleared out. Her parents were too kind to say no outright, and this way they'd be gone before it mattered. Hunger, she'd learned, hurt worse than cold ever did. "Look at you, Off travelling while the rest of us freeze. Ray gave an approving nod, eyes flicking sideways. Go on, enjoy yourselves. I'll watch the place while you're gone. Claire caught her parents' eyes and let them see how calm she was. Everything was under control. After Ray left, her parents pulled her aside, smoothing a hand over her hair, asking what exactly she thought she was doing. I need you both to listen to something serious, and I need you to trust me without asking why yet. Claire dropped the playfulness from her voice entirely. Seeing how grave she'd gone, her parents settled in and gave her their full attention. Claire pulled out her phone and opened a message thread she'd mocked up the night before, under a contact she'd saved as National Weather Service. She told them she had a college friend working at the weather service now, and 2 days ago, that friend had warned her, off the record, that an unprecedented deep freeze was coming within the week. Temperatures could fall more than 90 degrees and stay down for a long time. The agency hadn't gone public yet, worried about panic. Hadn't the weather been strange all fall? Claire pressed. Cold snaps out of nowhere, warm spells that made no sense. That wasn't a feeling. The whole climate system was breaking down. Nothing had been confirmed publicly yet, she said, and Ray would never believe an unverified rumour anyway. Better to wait until the cold actually arrived and tell him then. Her parents traded a long look. Finally, Robert let out a breath and said they'd trust her, since the old house needed fixing up regardless. Early the next morning, Claire helped her parents pack. Anything that could hold heat went into the bags, down to the last dish rag. Everything left behind was summer clothes and beach gear, useless in the cold. She also bought several tubs of popsicles and crammed them into the freezer. What in the world do you need all that ice cream for? Your nephew loves popsicles, don't you remember? Diane let it go, patting Claire's head, convinced her daughter had finally grown sensible. Claire only smiled and said nothing. While her parents were on the phone with the movers, Claire mounted tiny cameras in every corner of the apartment, checking each feed twice before she was satisfied. The movers arrived fast, everything already boxed. The family made the drive to the old homestead while the roads were still clear. This is unbelievable. I barely recognized the place. Diane stood frozen in the doorway. Robert ran a hand along the new wall, marvelling at what Claire had pulled off in 3 days. A gust of wind cut through without warning, sharp enough to make Claire shiver. She watched a thick bank of white cloud rolling in over the ridge and knew the freeze nobody had ever seen the likes of was only hours out. Claire got her parents settled inside and lit the masonry stove, warming the house through fast. They ate a quick meal together before diving into a full cleaning pass. Eyeing the supplies stacked in the kitchen, Diane scolded her gently for spending so much on food, asking if she planned on living there forever. What her mother didn't know was that the kitchen stores were barely a third of what Claire had actually laid in. The bulk of it sat hidden in the cellar out back, the real foundation of everything she'd built. The next morning, Ray called, asking if his family could move in yet. Claire pulled up the camera feed to check the state of things first. "Keys right by the door. Let yourselves in." Diane said it flatly into the phone, no hesitation at all. On the monitor, 3 shapes slipped in through the front door like they were casing the place. "Oh, this is nice. Way warmer than our own apartment." Ray sank back into the sofa, visibly melting into it. Denise crossed her legs and scrolled her phone, eyes drifting around the room. "Your husband really does take care of things. The boy won't have to freeze now. Shame this place isn't actually ours." Something flashed behind Ray's eyes. Wasn't this supposed to be mine anyway? The sister's supposed to give way to her brother. Why should I be stuck in some damp little box while she gets to sit pretty in a place like this? Wish they'd just gone on that trip and never made it back. A cold current seemed to move straight through Claire's chest. Whatever worry she'd carried about her plan upsetting her mother was gone now, burned clean out of her. Claire saved the footage, then leaned back against the sleeping bench to wait for the real freeze to arrive. Exhausted from the last 5 days, she went under without meaning to. She woke to her phone lit up with breaking alerts, every feed she followed in chaos, people posting about the cold, about running out of food with no stores laid in, panic spreading in real time. "Sweetheart, why did it get so cold so fast? I nearly froze just stepping outside a minute ago." Diane rubbed her stinging face, badly shaken. Claire touched her mother's cheek and told her gently that this was the freeze she'd warned them about, and it wasn't going to be short. Robert came over at that, and Diane, worry written across her face, reached for her phone to call Ray and tell him to start stockpiling. Claire said nothing. She simply opened the recording from the day before and let it play, Ray's voice filling the room, saying the same ugly thing over and over. At the same time, Claire stopped hiding the truth about the life she'd already lived. She told her parents plainly that last time, out of kindness, they had taken Ray's family in, and after the freeze hit, Ray and Denise had put them out on the street to save the food for themselves. Her parents stared, not sure whether to believe it. But everything strange Claire had done over the last 5 days made the story impossible to dismiss. "Maybe we should just wait and see. Surely his family wouldn't show up with nothing." Robert tried to smooth things over, still holding out hope. He had badly underestimated how far Ray's greed went. They arrived with nothing but their appetites. "Hey, it's freezing out. Why don't we do a barbecue tonight?" Claire looked between her parents, craving the smell of it more than she wanted to admit. The food came together fast, smoke curling off the grill, warmth filling the little house. Her parents gathered around the table with her, all three laughing over the meal. Claire wrapped a strip of grilled short rib with cilantro and wilted spinach, dipped it deep in sauce, and let the heat of it spread through her whole body. Right then. Ray's number lit up the phone. "Why isn't there any food in this house?" Claire pulled up the camera feed just in time to see Denise flinging open every cabinet in the kitchen, tearing through them one by one. The freezer door hung wide open, melted popsicle sticks scattered across the floor. Cole sat wrapped in blankets on the bed, shaking hard. "Didn't you say you two were going travelling? So we ate through what was there before it went bad, obviously." Diane answered without a hint of apology. "It's -94 out there. You're telling me your own house has nothing in it at all?" Claire speared a thick slice of meat, dragged it through the sauce, and answered around a mouthful, offhand. "I think there might be some snacks under my bed, actually." The line went dead on his end immediately.
"Why don't they just stay out on the street?" Ray was shouting, tearing through the room in a rage. "It's getting colder and colder. I hope that whole family freezes." Denise sneezed and spat the words out bitterly. "Yeah, all she left was popsicles. Popsicles, that's it. That woman deserves whatever's coming to her." Cole kicked a stick across the floor, face twisted with anger. Diane's hand curled into a fist. Something in her had finally clicked into place, seeing exactly what her brother's family really was. "Sweetheart, did your uncle really put us out on the street last time?" Diane asked it slowly, one word at a time. Claire nodded, then looked over at Robert. "You remember the story about the $30 Dad borrowed off Ray for the wedding, right? And Mum, you told me once, last time, that you almost married the foreman's son instead because of something Ray did. I only know all of that because I said it out loud last time, in a panic, while you two were kneeling in the snow, begging him to open the door. Both her parents went quiet. Neither of them had ever told the other that particular story. Then why didn't we clean the place out entirely? Why leave that family any food at all? From that point on, her parents stood fully in her corner. Claire pointed at the footage. Expired milk did nothing but harm a person's body, she told them, and the snacks past their date tasted about as bad as it got. Dying too fast wouldn't do. She wanted them alive enough to really feel it. She walked her parents through the rest of her plan. They agreed without hesitation. Full and warm, Claire stretched out on the heated bench, content down to her bones. 94 below zero outside meant nothing to a house holding steady above 77 degrees. The next morning, Claire pulled up the apartment feed with Diane beside her. "Mum, what do you think?" Diane shook her head, more disappointed than Claire had ever seen her. Whatever hope she'd held on to for her brother was gone. Right then, Ray's call came through again. Diane answered. Sobbing poured out of the other end immediately. Whatever was left of them had clearly broken. Diane listened a moment, hung up without a word, and blocked the number for good. Claire's mouth curved. "Dear Uncle, what's coming next is the real thing." She switched her phone over to a remote control app. The old backup phone she'd hidden on top of the wardrobe weeks earlier lit its screen, the image shaky but connected. She opened the smart home app tied to the city apartment. The unit's Wi-Fi-linked air conditioner still showed online. Claire locked the remote settings behind a password, then flipped it into cooling mode. Inside the hour, cold air was pouring straight through the living room. With that done, she curled back into her blankets and scrolled the news at her leisure. Most people online had worked past the initial panic and moved into swapping survival tips. One camp swore by drinking hot water round the clock. Another piled every blanket they owned into a single makeshift nest. A week slipped by in what felt like a blink. Ray's household had gone completely silent, surviving off water melted from popsicles. Claire had to admit, grudgingly, they'd hung on far longer than she expected. The air conditioner had been smashed apart at some point, more trouble than it was work to them by then. Claire found she'd lost interest in checking on them at all. Her own life was 10 times more interesting than theirs right now. Some time later, she found Ray's family lined up outside a hospital on the camera feed. Her own line stayed quiet. She'd rocked the number days ago. Her parents cooked something different every day, the three of them tucked away in the old house, unbothered and easy. Smoke curling steadily from the chimney drew notice from the village. Through the outer cameras, Claire spotted a few figures in heavy padded coats lingering at a distance, watching the house. That set off every instinct she had. She switched the perimeter fence to run hot around the clock. She'd already learned once what people were capable of under enough pressure. If blood relatives could turn on each other over a stocked pantry, strangers wouldn't hesitate at all. After warning her parents, Claire rigged a few homemade tools for protection, and the three of them started taking shifts, watching the monitors through the night. A few nights later, well past midnight, the camera caught two figures stacking themselves into a human ladder against the outer wall. A second later, both of them flinched back and scrambled down again. Two more groups tried the front gate after that, but the steel door held, nothing they could break through quickly. Between the failed attempts and the cold biting at them, they gave up before long,
and the deepening snow made the road to the house harder to reach with every storm that followed. With the danger past, Claire finally had the stomach to check on Ray's family again. Denise and Cole had frozen into a huddle, arms locked around each other, and something in the sight of it tugged at her despite everything. Ray sat slumped nearby, hollowed out, cheeks sunken, a popsicle stick in one hand as he hummed something tuneless to himself and rocked in place. Even through a screen, the sight of it caught Claire off guard for a moment, but the feeling didn't last. Pity for people like that only ever came back to bite the one who felt it. She watched him work through his 5th popsicle before finally slumping over, and whatever bitterness had been sitting in her chest for 2 lifetimes finally let go. A full month into the storm, the power outside cut off entirely. If the 3 of them hadn't kept shoveling in shifts, the house would have vanished under the snow line completely. The internet signal died not long after. Claire and her parents settled into a quiet routine. Meals, a little gardening, old movies in the evening to pass the time. They filled styrofoam bins with soft dirt from the back plot and planted tomatoes and a few young eggplants. Another 2 weeks passed before Claire pushed the door open one morning and felt something different in the air, the bite on her cheeks noticeably softer than before. She called her parents to the door at once. They stood there together, feeling the same thing. The cold outside had eased, unmistakably. Not long after, a plane passed low overhead, scattering leaflets across the property. The message was simple. The disaster was ending. The country had made it through. More time passed, the last of the snow tapering off until it stopped falling for good. Nobody had to shovel anymore. 3 months after they'd first shut themselves into the old house, the freeze finally broke, and the temperature climbed back to normal. Families up and down the road started stepping outside again. Once things settled, Ray's little apartment reverted to Diane, the deed transferred over without argument from anyone left to argue. Not long after, the whole block went up for redevelopment, and the payout came in near $2 million. Claire wondered sometimes how Ray would have reacted if he'd ever found out. With that money in hand, her parents sold the old homestead and put the proceeds toward a beautiful new apartment in the city. In the wide, sunlit living room, Diane and Robert were deep in a cheerful argument over where to go on vacation next month. Asia, Robert said, clearly set on it. I've wanted to see those palace grounds for years. Oh, come on, listen to me for once. Europe's easier to get around. We won't even need a tour guide. Diane wasn't budging either. Claire sat back and listened to them go back and forth, something warm and full settling in her chest. The freeze had worked on her family like a test none of them had asked for. Diane, who used to bend over backward for her brother without thinking twice, had become a woman who actually let herself enjoy her own life. Robert had traded his endless afternoons of fishing and chess for something he'd finally understood was worth more of his time. After everything the cold had put them through, her family had come out the other side closer than they had ever been, bound now by something sturdier than blood. Family, Claire had finally learned, was never a chain forged by lineage. It was the choice 2 people made, over and over, to walk toward each other on purpose.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing for more. We'll see you next time. See ya!